Ja, vielen Dank für die Begrüßung, für die einleitenden Worte. Vielen Dank für die Einladung, dass ich hier heute Abend einen Text von mir vorstellen darf. Genau, der Vortrag heute Abend ist ein Auszug eines ersten Kapitels oder eines ersten Versuches eines Kapitels meiner Doktorarbeit, an der ich jetzt seit 1,5 Jahren circa arbeite. Also es ist alles noch sehr Work in Progress. Wenn es also noch nicht fein geschliffen ist und so wie Judith Butler es sagen würde, dann möge man es mir nachsehen. Ich arbeite dran. Genau, wir haben gerade schon gehört, dass Diskussionsfragen und Verständnisfragen oder Diskussionsfragen am Ende des Vortrags gestellt werden dürfen. Ich halte den Vortrag ja auf Englisch. Es ist vielleicht eine Thematik, die nicht allzu bekannt ist. Wenn also Verständnisfragen auftauchen sollten, dann gerne schon während des Vortrags die Hand heben und nachfragen. Ich bin gerne dazu bereit, zwischendurch auch zu unterbrechen. Genau, und ich werde jetzt ins Englische switchen and introduce you to my talk. This is my outline. I would like to first give you a general overview of my PhD project and also provide you with a definition of how I understand queer and queerness in my dissertation context. The second section will be about the genre, transnational literature, the role of the author, and the literary market. This is just like a context kind of section. It relates thematically to my overall project, but also in more specific terms to the topic of today. The theoretical framework that I'm going to present then aims at combining aspects of queer theory and affect theory. This will probably be the more challenging section of my talk. And in the fourth section or chapter, I will zoom into Taiye Selasi's Ghana Must Go and give you two close readings of literary analysis to show you how what I'm doing all day long, so to speak. Okay, so my PhD project in general. With this literary studies project, I want to contribute to an academic discourse on subject formation and agency. I want to do this by investigating literary representations of queerness and of different forms of affect in a selection of contemporary transnational novels and short stories. It is one aim to examine not only deconstructive aspects regarding identity formation processes, but also to consider reconstructive and generative moments of subjectivity. The literary works under investigation present characters who queer emotional frameworks and create strategies of emancipation and agency. My understanding of queerness relates to the realms of the political, the social, and the sexual, and is predominantly affiliated to the discourse critique developed within a queer of color critique. If you have questions regarding queer of color critique, we could maybe talk about this later on. Frederick Ferguson states about queer of color critique that it interrogates social formations as the intersections of race, gender, sexuality, and class, and this is, I think, the more important aspect about it, with particular interest in how those formations correspond with and diverge from nationalist ideals and practices. So I think the first part, race, class, gender, this is what we are used to in general gender studies terms, but a queer of color critique really looking at how that corresponds to nationalist ideals, especially in the US American context. Queerness, in my understanding, is not exclusively restricted to sexual identities, but reflects resistance to notions of purity. With regard to Taiye Selasi's work, I would argue that literary constructions of racial, sexual, and gender identities are under scrutiny. She creates characters that are not easily pinned down, so to speak. She creates characters that allow the acknowledgement of identities that are multiple, contradictory, and unstable. Characters who further a process of disidentification with damaged stereotypes. I follow José Esteban Muñoz his work and distance myself from associations with queerness with the embodiment of the antisocial, negativity, or the death drive, as you might know it from the queer theorist Lee Edelman. He focuses on queerness as being a disruptive force that aims at the death drive, negativity, the antisocial, because queer bodies do not reproduce, so to speak. While Edelman's arguments look at disruption, in my work, the power of queerness does not end at destruction. I'm interested in examining the generative potential of queerness through its act of disrupting. So queerness disrupting something, but at the same time generating then space for something new to be generated, to be reconstructed. Thereby, I want to elaborate on Munoz's acknowledgement of queerness as the warm illumination of a horizon imbued with potentiality. And if you just compare this to death drive and negativity, you automatically see a difference, I hope. Further, I situate in these moments of potentiality a generative logic of subject formation as discussed by Lois McNay. This generative logic considers forms of agency and unexplained capabilities of individuals to respond to difference in a more creative fashion. To explain this, she analyzes and looks at discourses about subjects and subjectivities, claiming that although the subject is granted with sort of entitlements of autonomy and agency, there's also this negative idea about it that as soon as difference comes along, you are always subjected to it, right? You get into this state of passivity. And she looks at how subjects respond to differences in a creative fashion where they maintain agency and autonomy. And this is sort of the generative autonomous logic that I look at. Combining her logic to the potentialities voiced in a queer of color critique, I will make use of a mode which I call generative queerness. With regard to my overall project, I'm interested in investigating in what ways this mode is embedded in literary writing. That was the first part. And I will now come to a more fluffy kind of section, talking about the genre and the role of the author. From the very beginning, I was intrigued by the dynamics of the stories, the protagonists, and the energy that revolve around the actors of world literature or transnational literature, also immigrant literature. Voices that suggest the connectedness of human experience, modern and hip yet political concepts such as the Afropolitan or Afropolitanism that resemble notions of Black empowerment and Black autonomy. Endeavors that aim at deconstructing and reconstructing identities. To me, as a white reader, the texts of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Novale Bulawayo, Juno Diaz, Tejo Cole, Ayobami Adebayo, Yagyasi, or Rakesh Satyal represent powerful contributions unsettling white supremacy on the literary market. This is, by the way, the most colorful slide I have in my presentation, so enjoy it while it lasts. If you have questions regarding the strategies, how I see their ways of unsettling white supremacy on the literary market, we could talk about it later on. Also, with their works and public appearances, the authors speak to a broader political discourse of racial inequality and social injustice. As much as I'm attracted by notions of similarity and connectedness and the opportunity to relate to incidences covered in the texts, it is also clear that I'm reading of, and now also writing about, things, actors, people that I'm not. I'm not a person of color. I see these conflicting incidences of relatability on the one hand and unbridgeable racial gaps on the other already as sort of a queer moment, and as a constant reminder that these literary texts are both invitations to and prohibitions against. You are invited to read these stories, but you can only identify with them so far. What I found equally intriguing to the stories was the performance of the authors. I would like to give two examples here. In February 2017, Junot Diaz stated in the New Yorker Fiction podcast that despite the fact that the US American society perpetuates a narrative of being an immigrant society, the majority of what we would call the immigrant experience has not been touched by our literary artists. Given the ubiquity, the overall presence of immigrant experience, I would argue that immigrant writing is not ubiquitous in our literary culture. His remarks hint at the significance of immigrant identities and writing, the act of writing that disrupts common understanding of national culture. The second example is by Taiye Selasi, who complicates the relationship between location, belonging, origin, and home in her talk, Don't Ask Me Where I Come From, Ask Me Where I'm Local. And it's funny that Frau Gottsman introduced her as a British author, and I think Selasi would not say, yes, I am a British author. She very much complicates this notion, because she points out in that talk that whenever she's being introduced to an audience and somebody says, this is Taiye Selasi from, the answer never fits, because she has sort of multiple origins. She was born in London, but she was raised in New York City. Her parents are from Ghana and Nigeria. She lived in Saudi Arabia. So she has so many places of origin that the question, where are you from, does not really work. And she says that the group of people for whom this categorization does not work grows. So instead, she claims that instead of asking, where are you from, you should ask, where am I local? And she proposes to answer this question with the 3 R's: rituals, relationships, and restrictions. So she pretty much goes away from this normative idea of saying, this is where I'm from, this is who I am, but really complicating the relationship of belonging, home, and being. I intentionally focused on public appearances of the authors because, as I said, I wanted to show you how they understand their writings and what backdrop they situate their writings in. But also, I wanted to show you that authors such as Selasi and Diaz make use of public appearances a lot, also on social media, to draw attention to a broader political and social endeavor. These are not authors that just stay at home, write their genius works, and you will never ever see them again. These are authors that go out, they make lots of public appearances, give interviews, are very active on social media to not just write fiction, but also to write on broader political issues, oftentimes racial and class issues. Okay, I hope I sort of gave you an overview of how I see the authors and the genre, and I will now come to the more theoretical part. So bear with me. The experience of leaving, of loss, and of distance is central for the characters in Taiye Selasi's Ghana Must Go. As critic Nell Freudenberger notes, Selasi suggests that the enormous psychic strain of emigration might take its toll, producing a kind of torpor, some sort of apathy or drowsiness. To this, I add that feelings of shame and guilt as primary negative affects play a major role in creating and maintaining this torpor. In her work, Touching Feeling, Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick introduces her understanding of shame and guilt by relating these two emotional states to the individual as well as to the social. So guilt and shame are emotional states that you never experience if you're only on your own, right? These are emotions that only occur and arise in connection to others. If you've lived on an island forever and ever, you would never ever be ashamed or feel guilty. She distinguishes between shame and guilt, whereby shame attaches to and sharpens the sense of what one is, while the latter attaches to what one does. So there's a distinction between being and doing. And of course, that could be complicated because your actions always speak of who you are, but in affect theory, sometimes it does make sense to make this distinction. Also, she says, shame is often considered the affect that most defines the space wherein a sense of self will develop, which I take to mean not at all that it is the place where identity is most securely attached to essence, but rather that it is a place where the question of identity arises most originally and most relationally. Now that means that shame, if you feel ashamed, you're most likely to question yourself, right? Maybe you found yourself asking, oh, why am I this way, when you feel ashamed of yourself. So by asking that question, and she recognized that, you know, that this is the process that takes place, that does not mean that there is an essential identity, but rather through the act of questioning it, the constructive part of identity becomes most visible. Sedgwick's understanding of affect as specifically located in identity-forming processes ties into my usage and idea of queerness. Queerness as this disruptive force that, you know, wants to dismantle. And queerness too lingers where identity is most questionable and unstable. Regarding intersections between queerness and affect, I want to refer to Gregg and Segworth's description of affect as being born in in-betweenness and residing in besideness. If that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry. This vague spatial capacity in betweenness, besideness, hint at a logic of non-traceability, and like queerness, of its refusal to be intelligible or identifiable. This is also where the distinction between affect, emotion, or feeling comes in, whereas affect is something that cannot be traced. It's just some kind of mood in your body. Feelings are nameable, they have terms, and they always happen in relation to another object. So, but affect, as sort of this blurry kind of mood thing, has very much in common with queerness, because it's also not relatable and also not traceable. But I also see the striking difference between queerness and affect in their capacity and urge to belong and to relate. After all, affect marks a body's belonging to a world of encounters. So affect is always aiming at belonging somewhere, right? Queerness, I claim, does not aim at belonging, but through its disruptive forces very much creates moments in which notions of belonging can be realized. Queerness is the force that affect necessitates to realize its own force to belong or not to belong, and to reside in the offs and in-betweens. So in order to connect somewhere, there has to be some sort of disconnection before, right? And you need this dichotomy, you need this binary to always connect, disconnect, connect. Only if you are disconnected, you can connect. And I claim that queerness creates this disconnection every time again, which enables you then to connect with feelings, emotions, etc. Relating to more concrete emotions of shame and guilt, it is queerness that allows for an emancipation from these negative regulatory frameworks, to unbelong, to disidentify, and to generate new emotional forms of affinity. So why talking of queerness and queering and not just simply of dismantling or disrupting? I see these moments of emancipation as queering moments because they denote situations in which heteronormativity is most questioned and challenged. And in the following close readings, I want to show you how I see this dismantling of heteronormativity in the novel. This is where the fourth part begins. Ghana must go. The German title of the novel, by the way, is Dinge passieren nicht einfach so. Some people know the German version of the book. Okay. The novel Ghana Must Go, but published in 2013, tells the story of family Sai, of Kweku and Fola Sai and their 4 children, Olu, Kehinde, Taiwo, and Saidi. Kweku and Fola migrated to the United States in the 1970s to fulfill their American dream. In the first part of the book, Kweku Sai's death serves as point of departure for the plot, which then develops along the events of his children learning of their father's death, their reaction to it, their thoughts, memories, and emotions. The primary social environment in the novel is the family. Selasi tells a success story of an immigrant family whose members present the spirit of achievement and success. Throughout the novel, struggles concerning difference, being black, being other, play out along the lines of being black and being immigrant in a white society, but these struggles in the outside permeate the structure within the family as well. The tensions of not fitting in, of being estranged, take place within the family itself. The story concentrates on how overall dynamics of achieving, failing, and leaving induce strains within an entire family across generations. And for the following for the two readings I want to provide, I will focus on two characters. The first one is the father figure, Kweku, who dies, but he's very much present in the novel, and whom I read as heteronormative. He performs heteronormative identity roles of masculinity that prevent him from experiencing shame and guilt. In the second reading, I will show how his son Kehinde deals with emotional frameworks very differently than his father, and how he queers those fixed identity roles. Kweku. Throughout the novel, Taiye Selasi's narrative emphasizes Kweku's urge to represent stable identity roles of masculinity. Not only do they grant him superiority in his family and at his job, but they also further or suggest stability and closure, and thereby avoid disruption, hence queerness. He's oftentimes denoted with the father, the doctor, the provider, and in very capitalized terms, sort of suggesting some kind of essential identity behind that. In the following example, I want to provide a reading which shows how the narrative itself creates moments of disruption and destabilization. And this is a moment where he learns of his mother's death, the mother that he had left behind in Ghana years before, and he had always envisioned how it would be like, what it would be like to come back and to tell her, you know, I made it, I'm a surgeon, I make a lot of money, I'm successful, but he comes back too late. He imagined this moment every day in Pennsylvania, how his cameraman would film it, panning up to her face, cue strings, tears in mother's eyes, wonder, joy, amazement, the awe of the siblings, the jubilation, cue drums. Then the dancing and feasting, fish grilled, a goat slaughtered, red sparks from the fire leaping for joy in the sky. The reunion a bridge, her fulfillment the brick. This is how he planned it, but this is not how it happened. By the time he returned, she was gone. From the first passage, the first part of this passage suggests continuity, right? You have those long sentences, this listing of different entities, which are then interrupted by the indented lines, and this is the structure just as it appears in the novel, right? I did not make this up. So by those indented lines, the impact of what was not realized, what was lost and failed, gains more weight. Moreover, these lines hint at unstable conditions that the characters are exposed to throughout their lives. You plan certain things, you envision certain things, but then it's like reality check, you failed, it didn't work. These unstable conditions generate a backdrop against which I read Kweku's urge to represent stable and unquestioned roles of masculinity. The change of text lines and narrative mode affirms Kweku's powerlessness by formally shutting down his voice and by having someone else, the narrator, speak for him. In the first passage, you see things through his thoughts, you are in his thoughts, and the short lines are then objectifying him again, right? So taking away his agency, so to speak, on a very formal basis. This is literary studies. With the following example, I want to show the relation between identity roles and affect. Through the novel, there are scenes, and you already see this here, where there appears a cameraman that Kweku envisions, and he envisions him filming him basically his entire life. And this is a moment where the fourth baby was born, a premature baby. It's not sure whether she lives or not, because he's a doctor, he's assigned with lots of responsibility in the sense of go and save our daughter. So this is the moment. He went back to the waiting room. Olu, first son, looked up. Watch your brother and sister, I'll be right back. Where are you going? To check on the baby. Can I come with you? Come on then. They walked down the hospital hallway in silence. His cameraman walked backward in front of them. In this scene, a well-respected doctor goes striding down the hallway to save his unsavable daughter, a Western. He wished he had a weapon, little six-shooter, silver, too. Something with more shine than a Hopkins MD. Presently, Olu, what is it? And scene. Nothing, Kweku chuckled, just tired, that's all. In this moment of overbearing responsibility, Kweku fears moments of guilt and shame, moments in which his self is most questioned and unstable. Therefore, he urges to stage himself in gendered categories that are socially verified, stable, and accepted. The well-respected doctor, the cowboy. A cowboy never fails, right? John Wayne never loses. And the narrative with those sort of stage directions in the scene, end of scene, it's like a stage direction. It's like reading a theater play. So the notion of performance, of performativity, of identity roles is underlined. This is Kweku, and I will now turn to his son, Kehinde, whom I read as queer. In the story, Kehinde is not presented as a homosexual character. In fact, there is little information provided about his sexual desire or sexual identity. But his relation and positioning towards his father and his family members, especially within the heteronormative matrix, make his character intriguing for a queer reading. In the following, I want to contrast Kehinde's behavior to that of Kweku, especially with regard to dealing with negative feelings. The following scene from the novel resembles moments of autonomy and self-reflexivity. The story depicts Kehinde seeking guidance, help and assistance by staying in a psychiatric clinic for a while and engaging in conversations with a therapist in which he openly addresses his self-harm and suicide attempt. Can you stop it? Can you fix me? I'm a coward. I'm a punk. I stand in the chamber behind the glass walls. I can see all the people there passing me by, but I can't get to them, can't speak to them, can't tell them I'm in here. I can't break the glass. Protection, said the doctor. Protection from what? From your fear, from your hurt, from your anguish, your rage. I'm not angry, said Kehinde. You are, and you should be. Allow it, your anger. Permit it to be. Now, even though Kehinde is still sort of in a state of denial, well, I'm not angry, he openly engages in a conversation about himself to find forms of expression for his feelings. In the course of their conversation, feelings and emotions are explicitly articulated and discussed. And this very much differs from Kweku. We never have a scene in the novel where Kweku openly says, I'm sad, I'm ashamed, never ever. But more likely to have another character thinking of Kweku and then suggesting some sort of emotional state. Oh, he must have been ashamed, he must have been sad, or whatever. So this very much differs in the way that Kehinde is presented in regards of his own feelings. By seeking psychological help, hence by admitting the quote-unquote instability and openness of his self, Kehinde opens up space to reform and reconstruct a more coherent self. We found Kweku in very tight heteronormative roles of the cowboy, the well-respected doctor. But here, Kehinde, in a conversation, he opens up, he says, I'm a punk, I'm a coward, I don't know what I am. So he very much leaves the space open to reform and reconstruct. Relating to a queer of color analysis, the character initiates a process of disidentification with harmful identity constitutions. Further, according to Roderick Ferguson, disidentifying means determining the silence and ideologies that create white hegemonic structures. So he does not tap in, he does not maintain the structure and the frame that his father had once established. The closing. I do not read these literary representations of generative queerness, which I assign to Kehinde, nor the concept per se as a happy ending of a journey of self-discovery that now frees the character from struggle, queerness, or negative feelings. It's not like, oh, now it's a happy ending and Kehinde will never be negative again. Of course not. To my understanding, the contrary is true. Generative queerness describes moments of temporary coherence, but never of fixation. Queerness can only disrupt and dismantle as long as there are temporal categories, maybe moments of what Gayatri Spivak once called strategic essentialisms. By exemplarily focusing on the male characters of Kweku and Kehinde, and by discussing aspects of affect and queerness in Taiye Selasi's Ghana Must Go, I hope to have shown that her literary work beautifully represents a narrative and characters that embody notions of process, of momentary pause, and of an urging for new forms to be reconstructed and generated. Thank you very much.